I was halfway through my first coffee when Karen's voice cracked the morning like a sledgehammer. "This dock is mine by HOA law." Her flip-flops slapping my private pier as she charged toward me, oblivious to the Coast Guard lease that was about to sink her whole world. There she was, Karen Miller, the neighborhood's self-appointed dictator, storming down my cedar-planked pride and joy like she was leading a Viking raid. Her neon yellow HOA violation notice flapped in her hand, her face redder than a tailgate sunburn, and those oversized sunglasses bounced as she shrieked about community access rights. I stood on my deck, mug steaming, watching her unravel. The lake sparkled behind her, calm as could be, but Karen? She was a Category 5 hurricane in Capri's. I took a sip, smirked, and thought, "Lady, you just picked the wrong fight." It was a Saturday in June, and I'd been up since dawn, savoring the quiet of my slice of paradise. A modest lakeside property in Traverse City, Michigan, where the water's so clear you can see fish plotting their day. I'm Jack Thompson, 52, a retired mechanic who traded greasy wrenches for sunsets and a cold beer after a lifetime of fixing other people's messes. This place was my reward. 2 acres, a cozy cabin, and a dock I rebuilt plank by plank after the last owner let it rot. That dock wasn't just wood and nails. It was my sanctuary, my middle finger to the rat race. But Karen, she saw it as her personal battleground. I'd known about Karen since I moved in 6 months ago. The Pine Shores HOA, her kingdom, had rules for everything. Grass couldn't grow past 3 inches. Mailboxes had to be eggshell white. And God forbid your boat's name sounded offensive. My skiff, real deal, got a $25 fine for being too suggestive. I laughed it off, paid up, and kept my head down. But the dock? That was different. See, Karen didn't know something I'd kept under wraps. I leased that dock to the U.S. Coast Guard for emergency lake patrols. It wasn't just my property, it was a federal asset, and I had the paperwork to prove it. I wasn't some chump she could bully with her clipboard and bad perm. That morning, she hit me with everything she had. "Jack Thompson," she bellowed, planting herself at the end of my dock like she was claiming it for Spain. "This structure violates Article 7, Section 4 of the Pine Shores bylaws. All waterfront access is communal property." Her violation notice shook in the breeze, listing crimes like unauthorized private use and obstructing lake enjoyment. I strolled down from my deck, boots crunching on gravel, and leaned against a post. The air smelled of pine and fresh water, but Karen's perfume, a mix of lavender and pure rage, cut through it like a buzzsaw. "Karen," I said, calm as a priest, "this dock's on my deed, private property. You want to check the county records?" I gestured toward the shore, where my mailbox still had her last fine taped inside. She didn't blink. "The HOA supersedes your deed," she snapped, jabbing a manicured nail at me. "You're hoarding lake access from families. I'm fining you $500 a day until you comply." Her voice hit a pitch that scared a nearby gull into flight. I raised an eyebrow, picturing her typing that fine into her color-coded spreadsheet. $500? I spent less rebuilding the whole damn dock. Now, fellas, let's pause for a second. Ever had a neighbor stick their nose where it doesn't belong? Acting like they own your backyard? Maybe an HOA Karen with a rulebook thicker than her ego, measuring your fence posts or whining about your truck's oil spot. I've been there, and I know you have too. Drop a comment below with your wildest busybody story. Worst HOA fine, craziest neighbor meltdown, whatever's got you steamed. I'm reading every one, and trust me, I get it. Karens like this, they're why we dream of revenge with a cold one in hand. Karen thought she could steamroll me, but she was about to hit a brick wall. I crossed my arms, coffee still warm in my grip. "Karen, you're wrong," I said. "This dock's mine, and I've got the title to prove it. You keep pushing, you're gonna regret it." Her eyes narrowed, like she was sizing up a steak she couldn't afford. "Oh, Jack," she purred, venom dripping. "I've got lawyers who'll bury you. This isn't over." She spun on her flip-flops, leaving a trail of righteous fury as she marched back to her golf cart. Violation notice crumpled in her fist. I watched her go, the lake lapping softly against my dock. Lawyers? Fines? Bring it on. I dealt with busted transmissions and shady bosses tougher than her. But this wasn't just about a few planks of cedar. It was about my right to what I'd earned, to the peace I'd fought for after years of 60-hour weeks. Karen wanted a war? Fine. I'd fought worse and won. Back inside, I pulled out my deed from a fireproof safe under my desk. Clear as day. The dock was mine, built in '79, before the HOA even existed. Then I grabbed another file, one Karen didn't know about, a contract with the U.S. Coast Guard signed 3 years ago when I bought the place. After September 11th, the feds needed civilian docks for quick lake access, and I'd signed up partly for the extra $2,000 a year, mostly because I liked the idea of helping out. That lease made my dock untouchable, a fact I hadn't shared with nosy neighbors. Why? Because guys like me don't brag, we just wait for the right moment. I sipped my coffee, now cold, and stared out at the water. Karen's golf cart buzzed in the distance, probably off to terrorize someone else's lawn. She thought she had me cornered, outgunned, ready to fold. She didn't know I'd already won battles she couldn't imagine. Ones with torque wrenches, bank loans, and life itself. This was just a warm-up. I set my mug down and grinned. Karen wanted to play dirty? I had an ace up my sleeve, one with a federal badge and a cutter waiting offshore. She didn't know it yet, but her little HOA empire was about to take on water. Fast. By Monday, my mailbox was choking on HOA notices, each one dumber than the last. But when I caught Karen measuring my dock with a tape measure like some wannabe sheriff, I knew she'd made it personal. It was like she'd declared war on my slice of lakefront peace. And I wasn't just Jack Thompson, retired mechanic anymore. I was a man with a dock, a deed, and a secret that'd make her clipboard snap in half. Karen Miller, Pine Shore's HOA president and professional busybody, had turned her Saturday tantrum into a full-blown crusade. My quiet mornings of coffee and lake breezes? Gone. Replaced by a stack of neon violation slips accusing me of everything from obstructing community access to unapproved dock aesthetics. Aesthetics? Cedar, not a damn art gallery. But when I saw her out there, squinting at my planks like they'd insulted her personally, I leaned out my window and thought, game on, Karen. You're poking the wrong bear. It started Sunday night. I was grilling a burger on my deck. Nothing fancy. Just me, a patty, and some Merle Haggard on the radio. When I noticed flyers taped to every mailbox on my street. Big bold letters. Stop the lake hog. Jack Thompson denies your rights. Karen's name was at the bottom, with a clip-art sailboat that looked like it drowned in 1995. She'd spun her dock obsession into a neighborhood smear campaign, claiming I was hoarding lake access from families and seniors. Families? The closest kid around here was 30 and lived in his mom's basement. Seniors? They were too busy playing euchre to care about my dock. But Karen had her minions, half a dozen HOA loyalists who nodded at her every word like she was handing out free cruises. By morning, my inbox had 3 emails from neighbors I'd never met, asking why I was so selfish. Selfish? I'd rebuilt that dock with my own hands, my own cash. If anyone was selfish, it was the lady treating my property like her personal boardwalk. I wasn't about to let her lies fester. I fired up my laptop, cracked a beer, and dug into the Pine Shore's HOA bylaws. A 47-page PDF buried on their website, last updated when Reagan was president. Page 22, Section 8. Structures predating the 1987 HOA Charter are exempt from communal access clauses. My dock, built in '79, according to the county deed I'd triple-checked. Karen's bylaws were as toothless as a gummy bear, but she didn't care about facts. She cared about power. I printed that page, highlighted it, and taped it to my fridge next to a photo of my old Chevy. It wasn't just proof. It was ammunition. Still, I figured I'd try the high road first. Maybe Karen could be reasoned with. Spoiler, she couldn't. Tuesday night was the HOA meeting held in the community center. A beige box that smelled like mothballs and regret. I walked in, bylaws in hand, wearing my cleanest flannel. Karen sat at the head table, gavel in one hand, Starbucks in the other, like she was judge, jury, and barista. About 20 neighbors showed up, most of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I raised my hand during open comments. "Karen," I said, keeping it cool, "my dock's private property. Your bylaws don't apply. Check Section 8. I held up the page. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me, like I'd offered her a dead fish. "Mr. Thompson," she said, voice dripping with syrupy venom, "you're out of order. The HOA has full authority over lakefront structures. Your refusal to comply is noted, and fines will continue." She banged her gavel. Actually banged it, like we were in a courtroom, not a room with bingo cards stacked in the corner. The crowd murmured, but nobody backed me up. Cowards. That's when Mike stepped in. Mike Delaney, my neighbor 2 lots down, a 60-year-old Vietnam vet with a beard like a Brillo pad and a glare that could stop traffic. He'd been watching from the back, sipping coffee from a thermos that probably wasn't just coffee. After the meeting, he caught me outside. "Jack," he growled. "Karen's got her head so far up her own rulebook, she can't see daylight. You want me to have a word with her?" He cracked his knuckles, half smiling. I chuckled. "Appreciate it, Mike, but I got this." Truth was, I didn't want Karen running to the cops claiming harassment. Mike clapped my shoulder. "You change your mind. I'm here. Nobody messes with a man's dock." That right there, that's why I liked Mike. He got it, property, pride, the whole deal. Karen's stunt at the meeting lit a fire under me. All I wanted was to fish in peace, maybe crack a cold one while the sun sank into the lake. Instead, I was fighting a paper-pushing dictator who thought my dock was her ticket to HOA immortality. Her fines kept coming. $500, $750. Then a ridiculous $1,000 for ongoing defiance. Defiance? I was just living my life. She even got some kid, probably her nephew, to snap photos of my dock from the shore, like I was hiding a meth lab under the planks. That's when I caught her measuring it. Wednesday morning, tape measure stretched across my cedar like she was fitting it for a coffin. I yelled, "Find anything good, Karen?" She jumped, dropped the tape, and scurried off without a word. Oh, it was personal now. Her next move, she went nuclear. Thursday, I got a certified letter from the county. Karen had filed a zoning complaint, claiming my dock violated public access ordinances. She'd attached a 10-page report, complete with photos and a map highlighting my dock like it was a crime scene. The county set a hearing for next week. A hearing over a dock I'd paid for, sweated over, owned outright. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that letter, and felt my blood boil. Karen wasn't just annoying. She was trying to take what was mine, to bend me until I broke. Guys like me, we don't break, we rebuild. I leaned back, cracked my knuckles, and pulled out my Coast Guard lease from the safe. Thick packet, official letterhead, signed by Lieutenant Daniels himself. That dock wasn't just mine. It was Uncle Sam's, leased for emergency patrols, untouchable by HOAs or county hacks. Karen thought she'd won, that her complaint would scare me into submission. She didn't know I was bringing the Coast Guard to the party, and they don't play nice with clipboard queens. Karen strutted into the county hearing like she'd already won, her binder of evidence thicker than a ribeye, until I slid a folder labeled U.S. Coast Guard across the table and watched her confidence crack. It was Thursday afternoon, 1 week after her zoning complaint hit my mailbox, and the Traverse City County office was a circus. Karen Miller, Pine Shores HOA's clipboard czar, stood there in a Navy power suit, tossing her perm like she was auditioning for Perry Mason. Me? I was just Jack Thompson, 52, retired mechanic, sitting in a folding chair with a coffee stain on my jeans, ready to end this dock war once and for all. Karen thought she had me pinned. Fines piling up, neighbors whispering, a county official eating out of her hand. But that folder? It was my grenade, and I was about to pull the pin. She didn't know it yet, but her HOA throne was wobbling, and I was here to give it a shove. The build-up to this hearing had me itching for a fight. Not with fists, but with facts. After Karen's stunt with the county, I got to work. First call was to Lieutenant Brian Daniels, my Coast Guard contact, a no-nonsense guy who sounded like he bench-pressed buoys for fun. I faxed him Karen's complaint. Yes, faxed. The Coast Guard loves their 90s tech, and he laughed so hard I heard his coffee spill. Jack, he said, this lease is tighter than a submarine hatch. Signed in 2019, backed by a DHS memo on civilian partnerships. She's got no play. He sent me a copy of the memorandum, a crisp PDF citing federal authority under 14 USC section 522, which basically said my dock was off-limits to local busybodies. I printed it, stapled it to the lease, and tucked both into a manila folder I'd labeled in Sharpie, U.S. Coast Guard. Simple, bold, like a warning shot across Karen's bow. I hadn't always planned to play hardball. When I bought this place 3 years ago, the Coast Guard lease was a side hustle. $2,000 a year to let them use my dock for lake patrols. It started after September 11th, when the feds needed civilian spots for quick access to Lake Michigan's northern shores. I was fresh off a divorce, tired of city noise, and figured it was a win-win. Extra cash, a nod to the flag, and a quiet life. The dock was perfect, sturdy, deep water access, no neighbors close enough to complain. Or so I thought until Karen rolled in with her rulebook. That lease wasn't just a contract. It was my shield, and I'd kept it quiet to avoid questions. Now, it was time to unsheath it. The hearing room was a beige box with flickering fluorescence and a table that wobbled every time Karen slammed her binder down. About 15 people showed up, county staff, a couple HOA cronies, and Mike Delaney, my grizzled neighbor, who'd parked himself in the back row with a thermos and a smirk. The official, a tired guy named Carl with a comb-over and a tie older than me, called the room to order. Karen went first, launching into a presentation that could have doubled as a one-woman show. Mr. Thompson's dock, she declared, clicking through PowerPoint slides and Comic Sans, is a danger to public safety and a violation of Zoning Ordinance 12B. Her evidence? Photos of my dock. My beautiful dock, next to clip art of crying kids and sad ducks, like I was running a puppy mill on the water. She claimed it blocked community access and, get this, lacked proper permits. Permits? It was built in '79. She even said my lease was a myth, waving her hand like she was dismissing a bad waiter. Carl nodded, scribbling notes, and I felt the room tilt her way. I stayed cool, sipping water from a paper cup, letting her dig her own grave. Karen's voice hit a fever pitch, something about taxpayer rights, and I swear I saw Mike roll his eyes so hard he nearly fell over. When she finally sat down, Carl looked at me. Mr. Thompson, your response? I stood, flannel creased, and walked to the table. No binder, no slides, just my folder. Karen's wrong, I said, voice steady. My dock's private property, exempt from HOA rules per their own 1987 charter, Section 8. As for zoning, it's covered by this. I slid the folder to Carl, letting the U.S. Coast Guard label hit the light. Karen's smirk froze. Carl opened it, skimmed the lease, then the DHS memo, his eyebrows climbing like they were trying to escape his forehead. The room went quiet, except for Mike's low chuckle. Karen wasn't done, though. She leapt up, knocking her chair back. That's fake, she sputtered, pointing at the folder like it was cursed. He's lying. There's no lease. He's making it up to dodge fines. Her voice cracked, and her HOA pals shifted uncomfortably, like they'd just realized their queen was naked. Carl held up a hand. Mrs. Miller, I'll need to verify this. He looked at me, almost apologetic. Mr. Thompson, this lease changes things. If it's legit, federal law trumps local zoning. I nodded, calm as a lake at dawn. It's legit. Call Lieutenant Daniels. He'll confirm. Karen's face went from red to purple, like a grape about to pop. I glanced at Mike, who gave me a thumbs up, his grin saying, she's toast. I sat down, heart pounding but face stone cold. I didn't want to humiliate Karen, not really. I just wanted her off my dock, out of my life, so I could fish in peace. But she'd pushed too far, and now she was staring down a federal freight train. Carl shuffled his papers, muttering about procedure. Then he dropped the bomb. We'll need a site visit to confirm the dock status. I'm scheduling it for next week, and I want the Coast Guard there. Karen gasped, like he'd slapped her with a fish. The HOA cronies whispered, and Mike coughed to hide a laugh. Carl banged his gavel. Guess he'd caught the habit from Karen, and adjourned. Outside, Mike caught up with me, thermos swinging. You played that like a pro, Jack, he said. She's gonna need a bigger binder. I grinned. She's gonna need a lifeboat. We laughed. But inside, I was coiled tight. The site visit was my shot to end this, Lieutenant Daniels, the lease, the whole federal shebang. Karen thought she could bully me into submission, but her empire was teetering, and I was ready to push it over. When a Coast Guard cutter roared up to my dock, sirens blaring, Karen froze like a deer in headlights. She thought she could bully me, but she was about to salute the feds. It was a crisp Tuesday morning, 1 week after the county hearing, and my lakeside property in Traverse City, Michigan, was ground zero for the showdown of the century. Karen Miller, Pine Shores HOA's perm-wielding tyrant, had spent days prepping for this county site visit, strutting around my dock like she owned the deed. Me? I was Jack Thompson, 52, retired mechanic, sipping coffee on my deck, watching her unravel with a grin I couldn't hide. My secret weapon, the U.S. Coast Guard lease, was locked and loaded, and when that cutter's horn blew, Karen's whole world started to capsize. She'd pushed me too far, and now Uncle Sam was here to settle the score. The week leading up to this had been a masterclass in Karen chaos. After the hearing, where I dropped my Coast Guard folder like a mic, she doubled down. Flyers multiplied, now calling me a lake monopolist with fake federal ties. She'd even cornered neighbors at the gas station, ranting about how I was defrauding the county. My buddy Mike Delaney, the grizzled vet next door, texted me a photo of one flyer taped to his truck. "Jack's a liar," scrawled in Sharpie. I laughed. Karen's meltdown was performance art. But when I saw her Monday, back at my dock with a notepad, sketching my planks like she was Indiana Jones mapping a tomb, I knew she wasn't quitting. She was betting everything on this site visit, convinced the county would hand her my dock on a platter. Poor Karen. She didn't know the Coast Guard doesn't play HOA games. I'd prepped with Lieutenant Brian Daniels, my Coast Guard contact, who was itching to shut this down. "Jack," he'd said over the phone, chuckling, "we've dealt with pirates smarter than your HOA lady. I'm bringing the cutter. Let's make it clear who's boss." The lease was airtight, signed in 2019, backed by DHS authority under 14 USC Section 522, giving the Coast Guard priority access to my dock for emergency patrols. Daniels even faxed me an updated letter, on official letterhead, confirming the lease's 5-year renewal, set to kick in next month. 5 more years of federal protection, plus a $500 yearly bump in my payout. I tucked that letter into my safe, next to my deed, and slept like a baby knowing Karen was about to eat her own rulebook. The site visit started at 10 a.m. sharp. I was on my deck, flannel on, boots scuffed, when Karen rolled up in her golf cart, county official Carl in tow. Carl looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. His comb-over flopped in the breeze, and his clipboard was already soggy from lake mist. Karen, though, she was in rare form. New power suit, heels sinking into my gravel, waving a laser pointer like she was briefing NATO. "This dock," she announced to Carl, voice carrying across the water, "is an illegal structure blocking public access." She pointed at my cedar planks, then at a group of neighbors she'd dragged along, her HOA loyalists, plus a few curious folks holding coffee mugs. I spotted Mike in the crowd, leaning against a tree, thermos in hand, grinning like he'd bet on the winning horse. Before Carl could respond, the lake erupted. A Coast Guard cutter, 40 feet of steel and swagger, sliced through the water, red and white lights flashing, horn blasting twice. The crowd gasped. Karen's laser pointer clattered to the dock. Lieutenant Daniels stepped off, boots thudding, flanked by 2 crew members in crisp uniforms, radios crackling. "Jack!" He nodded to me, then turned to Carl. "Lieutenant Brian Daniels, U.S. Coast Guard. This dock's a federal asset under lease since 2019. Who's got a problem?" His voice was calm, like he was ordering a burger, but it carried the weight of a battleship. Carl's jaw dropped. Karen's face went whiter than her Lexus. Karen tried to rally. "This is a county matter," she squeaked, stepping forward, heels wobbling. "That lease is fake. He's lying." Daniels didn't blink. "Ma'am," he said, and that ma'am hit like a sledgehammer. "This is a restricted area under 14 USC section 522. Step back, or we'll have a problem." He motioned to his crew, who unrolled yellow tape, actual federal tape, across my dock's entrance. The crowd murmured, phones coming out to record. Karen's HOA pals backed up like they'd seen a ghost. Carl, sweating through his tie, stammered, "Lieutenant, can you confirm the lease?" Daniels handed him a folder, same one I'd shown at the hearing, plus the new letter. Carl skimmed it, his comb-over trembling. "This checks out," he muttered. That's when Karen snapped. "This is outrageous," she screamed, voice hitting seagull pitch. "I'm a taxpayer. I have rights. I'll sue you all. The county, the Coast Guard, him." She jabbed a finger at me, then Daniels, then the cutter itself. The crowd went silent, except for Mike, who coughed to hide a laugh. Daniels stepped closer, towering over her. "Ma'am," he said, slower this time. "Interfering with federal operations is a felony. Wanna keep going?" Karen froze, mouth open like a fish on a hook. Couldn't resist. "Your bylaws don't scare Uncle Sam, Karen," I said, loud enough for the crowd. A few neighbors chuckled, and Mike gave me a nod that said, "Nailed it." Carl, now fully spooked, turned to Karen. "Mrs. Miller, the lease is valid. Federal law trumps zoning. Your complaints dismissed." The crowd erupted. Some cheers, some gasps, one guy yelling, "About time!" Karen stood there, tape measure dangling from her purse, as her HOA empire crumbled. Her cronies slunk away, avoiding her eyes. She shot me a look, pure venom, but I just sipped my coffee and shrugged. The cutter's horn blew again as Daniels and his crew boarded, leaving the tape up as a warning. Carl scribbled a final note and bolted for his car, muttering about paperwork. I walked to the dock's edge, cedar creaking under my boots, and watched the cutter glide off. Karen stormed to her golf cart, heels catching in the gravel, and peeled out, leaving a cloud of dust and defeat. The neighbors dispersed, some patting my shoulder, others whispering about that crazy HOA lady. Mike sauntered over, thermos swinging. "Hell of a show, Jack," he said. "She's done." I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Justice tasted better than my morning coffee, but I didn't gloat. I just wanted my dock, my peace, my life back. I thought that was the end, until a letter arrived 2 days later that had me howling. The letter hit my mailbox like a cherry bomb. Karen Miller, Pine Shores HOA's clipboard queen, was out. Booted as president after neighbors, fed up with her reign, voted her into oblivion. It was Friday, 2 days after the Coast Guard cutter turned my dock into a federal no-fly zone and sent Karen scurrying like a rat off a sinking ship. I stood in my kitchen, a grin splitting my face, reading the official HOA notice. 60% of the neighborhood had signed a recall petition, citing abusive overreach. Abusive? Try unhinged. I was Jack Thompson, 52, retired mechanic, and I just watched my lakeside sanctuary in Traverse City, Michigan, go from Karen's battleground to my victory lap. That dock, my cedar-planked pride, was mine again, and Karen's empire? It was chum in the water. But that letter wasn't the only surprise waiting to make me laugh out loud. The fallout from the site visit spread faster than a bar fight. By Wednesday night, my phone was buzzing with texts from neighbors I barely knew. "Karen's done," wrote one. "Saw her crying in her golf cart," said another. Apparently, after Lieutenant Daniels and his cutter crew taped off my dock and Carl, the county official, shredded her complaint, Karen's HOA cronies turned tail. Her loyalists, those clipboard-toting minions who'd nodded at her every word, started whispering rebellion. Mike Delaney, my grizzled neighbor with the thermos and the vet's glare, filled me in over a beer that night. "Folks saw her lose it, Jack," he said, chuckling. Screaming at a Coast Guard officer? Bad move. They're calling it Dock Gate now. I nearly spit out my IPA. Dock Gate. Perfect. The neighborhood gossip mill was churning, and Karen was the grist. The recall was straight out of the HOA's own rulebook. Ironic, right? I dug up that dusty 1987 charter again, and there it was, Section 12, Removal of Officers, allowing a 60% vote to oust the president for conduct detrimental to the community. Karen's stunts, fines, flyers, that unhinged county complaint finally bit her in the perm. The petition started the day after the site visit, led by a quiet couple down the street who'd gotten a $200 fine for unapproved mailbox decals. My stand had lit a spark. The Coast Guard's arrival was the gasoline. By Thursday, Karen was history, replaced by a retired accountant named Ed who promised less drama, more barbecues. I liked Ed already. Word around the lake was Karen didn't just lose her title. She lost her grip. Mike heard she'd packed up her Lexus and moved to a condo in Grand Rapids, probably to terrorize some new set of doormats. Bet she's fining pigeons for flying too low, he joked, and I laughed so hard my ribs hurt. I didn't hate Karen, not really. She was a nuisance, sure, but I'd fought bigger battles. Bank loans, busted engines, a divorce that left me eating ramen for a year. This was about holding my ground, about keeping what I'd earned after a lifetime of sweat. That dock wasn't just wood. It was my line in the sand, and I'd held it. Life got sweet after that. Saturday, Mike threw a barbecue at his place, right on the lakefront. Half the neighborhood showed up. Grills smoking, Springsteen blasting, kids splashing in the shallows. I brought my skiff, real deal, and let folks take turns cruising the lake. My dock became the unofficial hangout. Folks tying up their boats, cracking beers, swapping stories about Karen's reign of terror. She fined me for my dog's bark, one guy said. Tried to ban my Christmas lights, grumbled another. I just nodded, sipping a cold one, feeling like I'd done more than save my dock. I'd given the neighborhood a win. No more violation notices, no more golf cart patrols. Just lake air, cedar planks, and freedom. Then came the twist that had me howling. Monday morning, my phone rang, Lieutenant Daniels, the Coast Guard officer who'd sunk Karen's dreams. Jack, he said, voice warm but official. Brass loved how you handled this. We're expanding lake patrols. Want to lease more of your dock space. Double the payout for $1,000 a year, plus a $1,000 bonus for the trouble. I leaned against my kitchen counter, jaw loose. For grand? A bonus? I'd signed the lease for pocket change and a pat on the back. But now it was paying better than my old wrench-turning days. Hell, Brian, I said. Throw in a new anchor and I'm in. He laughed. Deal. Papers are coming. I hung up, picturing a bigger boat, maybe a 20-footer with a trolling motor. Real deal too. Anyone? Sitting on my deck that night, lake lapping soft against my dock, I thought about what it all meant. It wasn't just about Karen or the HOA. It was about standing tall when someone tries to take what's yours. Every guy's got a Karen in his life. A boss, a neighbor, some suit with a rulebook trying to grind you down. You don't win by shouting louder. You win by knowing your rights, digging in, and fighting smart. I'd done that, and it felt damn good. My dock was mine, my piece was back, and the Coast Guard was practically writing me a thank you check. If that's not a win, I don't know what is. Fellas, if you got a kick out of watching Karen's meltdown, hit that like button. It feels better than landing a trout on the first cast. Share this with your pals who've battled their own Karens. HOA tyrants, nosy neighbors, you name it. Drop a comment with your craziest neighbor story. I'm reading every one, and I know you've got some wild ones. Subscribe and smack that bell so you don't miss the next showdown. Trust me, there's always another Karen out there. Let's keep sticking it to the busybodies, one dock at a time.